Elizabeth Mortimer's writing desk, where she waited for a husband who never returned. Locals say her ghost still writes here.
Undead City. The night comes alive. Believe it or don't. It's entirely your choice.
Yes, believe it or not, the choice is yours. Are you ready to listen? So, sit back, if you dare, and listen closely.
The last text message from Daniel Reed came at exactly 3:17 a.m. I found her diary. She never left the cottage. 3 days later, search and rescue teams discovered his abandoned car on the coastal road near Blackmere Village. His mobile phone lay on the passenger seat, battery dead. The keys still dangled from the ignition. No footprints led away from the vehicle despite the muddy ground. No CCTV captured his movements. It was as if Daniel Reed had simply vanished into the thick coastal fog. The local police filed it as another mysterious disappearance, the 7th in 5 years, all within half a mile of Widow's cottage. What they didn't report was what they found scrawled across his car's fogged-up windows from the inside. She won't let me leave until it's finished. Widow's cottage stands alone on the edge of the Cornish cliffs, a small stone structure weathered by centuries of salt and wind. Most tourists driving the coastal route between quaint fishing villages barely notice it, just another abandoned relic from a bygone era. But locals in Blackmere Village know better than to venture near it after sunset. They've grown up with the stories. The cottage dates back to the late 18th century, built by Sea Captain James Mortimer for his young bride, Elizabeth. Captain Mortimer spent most months at sea, leaving Elizabeth alone on the windswept cliffs. When news came of her husband's ship sinking off the African coast, Elizabeth refused to accept his death. Each night she lit a lantern in the window, guiding him home. She began writing frantically in her diary, filling pages with increasingly desperate entries. After 3 years of this ritual, villagers noticed the lantern had stopped appearing. When they finally checked the cottage, Elizabeth was gone. No body was ever found. Her diary lay open on the writing desk, the final entry, unfinished mid-sentence. I hear him calling from the rocks below. I must go to him. He needs me to finish. The cottage passed through various owners over the decades. None stayed longer than a few months. The pattern was always the same. First came the sounds of a quill scratching on paper in the empty study. Then the smell of seawater in rooms that had been thoroughly dried. Finally, the sound of a woman softly weeping behind locked doors that, when opened, revealed empty rooms. In 1879, novelist Margaret Crawford purchased the cottage, fascinated by its history. Her plan to write a book about Elizabeth Mortimer ended when she disappeared after just 6 weeks in residence. Her manuscript was found on the writing desk, the final page half completed. The last sentence read, I can hear her at night, her pen scratching endlessly. She wants me to finish her. The cottage stood abandoned for decades after that. During the Second World War, it briefly served as a coastal watch post. 3 Royal Navy officers stationed there vanished in a single night, despite a raging storm that should have made leaving impossible. Their logbook's final entry, written in increasingly shaky handwriting, woman in white seen on cliff edge again, says her story must be, by the 1970s, Widow's cottage had fallen into disrepair. The local council considered demolition, but preservation orders protected the historic structure. It remained a crumbling shell, visited occasionally by history enthusiasts or paranormal investigators. Most left with nothing more than photographs. Some left with strange, scratching sounds in their audio recordings. A few never left at all. Then, in 2018, Danielle Reed, a struggling true crime writer from London, learned of the cottage's history. Facing a publishing deadline and desperate for a compelling story, he decided Widow's Cottage would be perfect for his next book. Against the advice of local historian Mary Fletcher, he rented the property for a month-long stay. The cottage doesn't like outsiders telling its story, Mary warned him. Elizabeth chooses who speaks for her. Daniel laughed off her concerns. Ghost stories are good for book sales, he told her. The creepier, the better. He arrived at Widow's Cottage on October 2nd. His daily calls to his editor in London revealed initial excitement at the atmosphere of the place. You can practically feel the history in these walls, he said in one recorded call. The isolation is perfect for writing. No distractions, just me and Elizabeth's story. By the end of the first week, his enthusiasm had dimmed. He complained of trouble sleeping, of dreams filled with the sound of waves crashing against rocks. I keep hearing scratching in the walls, he told his editor. Probably mice. This place is ancient. His second week brought new concerns. I've found something odd, he said in his increasingly infrequent calls. The desk in the study, the writing desk, it's always cold to the touch, even when I've had the fire going all day. And sometimes I find it wet, like someone spilled water on it, but it smells like the sea. By the third week, Danielle had stopped calling his editor entirely. His only communications were brief text messages, usually sent in the early hours of the morning. Making progress, read one. Elizabeth is helping me, said another. His editor grew concerned, but assumed Daniel was deep in the writing process. Then came a flurry of increasingly disturbing messages on his final night at the cottage, 1:43 a.m. Found a hidden compartment in the desk. There's another diary, 2:15 a.m. These aren't Elizabeth's words. Someone else was writing through her. 2:38 a.m. The diary entries repeat. Same words, different handwriting. Dozens of people. 3:04 a.m. I understand now. She never finished her story. No one has. 3:17 a.m. I found her diary. She never left the cottage. When Danielle failed to return to London the following day, his editor contacted local police. The search revealed nothing except his abandoned car. The cottage appeared undisturbed. Danielle's laptop sat open on the writing desk, a document open on the screen. The manuscript, titled The Widow's Unfinished Business, contained 214 pages of completed text. The final page ended mid-sentence. The truth about Elizabeth Mortimer isn't that she died waiting for her husband. The truth is that she discovered he never intended to return, that he had another family in 4 months after Danielle's disappearance. True crime blogger Sophia Chen discovered his case. Fascinated by the connection to Widow's Cottage, she began investigating. Unlike Daniel, she approached with caution, interviewing locals and researching from the safety of her Airbnb in Blackmere Village. Mary Fletcher, now in her 80s, agreed to speak with Sophia. The cottage has a purpose, she explained. Elizabeth began something there, something she couldn't finish. She's been trying to complete it for 2 centuries, using anyone who stays too long. Sophia discovered that every disappearance connected to the cottage followed the same pattern. The victim became obsessed with Elizabeth's story, convinced they alone could tell it properly. All vanished, just as they approached some crucial revelation. Despite Mary's warnings, Sophia couldn't resist visiting the cottage. Just for photographs, she promised. An hour at most, in broad daylight. On April the 15th, Sophia arrived at Widow's Cottage just after noon. The caretaker who managed the property met her with the keys, reiterating that she must leave before sunset. The place plays tricks with your mind after dark, he told her. Sophia's Instagram showed photos posted throughout the afternoon. The cottage exterior, the stunning cliff views, the small study with its ancient writing desk. Her final post, at 4:47 p.m., showed the desk with caption, Elizabeth Mortimer's writing desk, where she waited for a husband who never returned. Locals say her ghost still writes here, trying to finish her final diary entry. When Sophia failed to return the keys by 6 p.m., the caretaker went to check. He found the cottage empty, Sophia's camera and bag still present. Her mobile phone lay on the writing desk beside a leather-bound book that hadn't been there that morning. The book lay open to a blank page, a modern pen placed neatly beside it. Police investigation revealed nothing. Sophia Chen joined the growing list of disappearances connected to Widow's Cottage. Social media buzzed briefly with theories, then moved on to fresher mysteries. 3 weeks later, Mary Fletcher received a text message from Sophia's number. I understand now. It wasn't Elizabeth keeping them here. It was what she discovered. I need to finish what she started. Mary reported the message to police, who dismissed it. The case was cold. Sophia's phone had never been found. Then came the handwritten letter, delivered to Mary's cottage without postmark or return address. The handwriting matched none of the known victims, yet contained phrases eerily similar to previous writings found at the cottage. It read, Dear Mary, Elizabeth Mortimer discovered her husband's terrible secret. Not his infidelity, something worse. The cargo his ships carried, the real reason he built the cottage so far from prying eyes, the tunnels beneath leading to the cove, the holding cells, the bodies. She began to document everything, but they found her before she could finish. They took her diary, but missed the final pages she'd hidden in the desk. Pages that would expose not just her husband, but half the gentry in Cornwall. She remains because her justice remains unfinished. We all remain. With each new voice, another piece of the story emerges. Soon we will have enough to reveal the truth that has been hidden for 2 centuries. Do not mourn us. We stay willingly now. Elizabeth has shown us the importance of finishing this work. The cottage doesn't take people, Mary. It reveals to them what matters more than their return. The letter was signed with a single initial, E. The following day, Mary Fletcher disappeared from her cottage. Her home was found undisturbed except for a single item on her kitchen table, an antique diary open to a blank page with a pen laid across it. Widow's Cottage stands empty once more, its stone walls keeping centuries of secrets. But on certain nights, when the coastal fog rolls in thick, locals swear they can see lights moving from window to window. And sometimes, just sometimes, the faint sound of multiple pens scratching on paper can be heard on the wind. The strangest development came last month, when a package arrived at the offices of the Cornish Historical Society. Inside was a complete manuscript titled The Mortimer Conspiracy, 2 Centuries of Silence. The accompanying note read simply, It is finished. Historians and legal experts who've reviewed the manuscript have been shaken by its contents. It details a slave trafficking operation run by prominent Cornish families throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, using the remote coastline and hidden caves as their base. Names, dates, ships' manifests, all meticulously documented across 2 centuries by different hands. Police have reopened investigations into the disappearances connected to Widow's Cottage. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed previously unknown tunnels leading from the cottage to a hidden cove. Excavations are scheduled to begin next week. But here's what troubles me most. The final page of the manuscript contains a list of contributors, 27 names of people who helped complete Elizabeth's work. Daniel Reed and Sophia Chen are among them. At the bottom, a handwritten note in faded ink. Justice delayed is still justice. My business is now finished. E.M. Yesterday, for the first time in 200 years, the light in Widow's cottage went dark and has not returned. Spotted an accident, a simple fall in the dark, but the residents of Blackwood Village knew better. No one just falls at Hargrove Manor, not when the house has claimed 17 lives in the past century. What the police reports don't mention are the handprints, dark, ashy marks wrapped around her ankles, marks that vanish by morning. Hargrove Manor stands on the edge of Blackwood Village, a massive Victorian structure with its windows like hollow eyes staring down at anyone who dares approach. Built in 1887 by Cole Baron Edward Hargrove, the mansion was meant to be a symbol of wealth and power. Instead, it became a tomb. The trouble began during construction. 3 workers died in accidents. One crushed by falling beams, another drowned in a well that shouldn't have had water, and a third simply disappeared, only to be found weeks later walled up in the cellar. Edward Hargrove dismissed these deaths as carelessness, pushing forward with his vision regardless of the cost. The Hargrove family finally moved in during the winter of 1889. Edward, his wife Margaret, and their 2 children, William and Elizabeth. For the first months, everything seemed perfect. Their parties were the talk of the county. The elite traveled for miles to be seen in the grand ballroom, with its crystal chandeliers and imported marble floors. But when spring came, so did the whispers. Margaret Hargrove began complaining about noises in the walls, scratching sounds like rats, but larger. Servants reported items moving on their own. Cold spots appeared in rooms that should have been warm. The cook quit after claiming someone or something had whispered her name while she worked alone in the kitchen. Edward dismissed it all. Superstitious nonsense, he said. Old houses settle. Imaginations run wild. But then came the night that changed everything. On April the 16th, 1890, the family retired as usual. Around 3 a.m., screams echoed through the mansion. Servants rushed to the master bedroom to find Margaret standing over Edward's body, a fireplace poker in her hand. His skull was crushed. Blood soaked the Persian rugs. When questioned, Margaret said only 4 words. The house wanted him. She was committed to an asylum where she died 6 months later, still muttering about the thing in the walls. The children were sent to relatives. The manor sat empty. Over the decades, various families tried to make Hargrove Manor their home. None stayed longer than 8 months. The pattern was always the same. First came the noises, then objects would move, then the apparitions started. Finally, someone would die. In 1923, the entire Johnson family, father, mother, and 3 children, were found in the ballroom, arranged in a circle. Their throats had been cut, but no weapon was ever found. The case remains unsolved. In 1952, famous author Raymond Carter bought the house, determined to write about its history. His manuscript was never completed. Police found him hanging from the chandelier in the main hall. His notes, scattered across his desk, contained one repeated phrase, "It's watching me from inside the walls." The manor was abandoned for decades after that, becoming more decrepit with each passing year. Local teenagers would dare each other to spend the night. Few made it past midnight before running out, white-faced and refusing to speak about what they'd seen. Then, in 2018, the Blackwood Historical Society decided to restore Hargrove Manor as a tourist attraction. Leading the project was historian Emily Winters, a skeptic who dismissed the stories as local folklore designed to scare children. Every old house has its myths, she told the local paper. We create these stories to process grief or explain accidents. There's nothing supernatural about Hargrove Manor. 3 weeks into the restoration, workers uncovered something behind the walls of the cellar. A hidden room sealed off for over a century. Inside were human remains, dozens of them. Investigation revealed they predated the house. The land, it seemed, was an unmarked gravesite dating back to colonial times. Emily insisted the project continue. The bones were respectfully removed for proper burial, but that night the first sighting occurred. A security guard quit on the spot after reporting a figure made of shadows moving through the grand hallway. Others soon followed. A wet, shuffling sound on the main staircase. The smell of damp earth and decay in rooms that had been thoroughly cleaned. Cold spots so intense they would cause frost to form on the windows in the middle of summer. Emily remained unmoved. Science would explain everything, she insisted. Then came the night of June 7th. Emily was working late, alone in the Manor's library. Security footage shows her working calmly at her desk until 11:42 p.m. Then she suddenly looks up as if hearing something. Her expression changes from confusion to horror. She stands, backs away from something the camera cannot see. The footage shows her running from the library through the main hall toward the front door. She never makes it. At the foot of the grand staircase, something trips her. The camera catches a glimpse of what looks like dark handprints wrapping around her ankles. She falls, her head striking the corner of the bottom step. By the time help arrived, the marks were gone. The restoration project was abandoned. Hargrove Manor stands empty once again, its windows like dead eyes watching over Blackwood Village. But locals swear that on certain nights, usually when the moon is hidden behind clouds, lights can be seen moving from window to window. And sometimes, just sometimes, a face appears at the upper window. A woman's face, her mouth open in a silent scream. The strangest part of Emily Winters' death wasn't captured by the security cameras. It was discovered days later when police reviewed her research files. In her final notes, dated the morning of her death, she wrote about a discovery in the Manor's original blueprints. Edward Hargrove had designed the house with strange proportions, walls too thick, spaces that didn't match up. The house had been built to hide something, or contain it. But here's what keeps me up at night. Last week, a development company purchased Hargrove Manor. Demolition begins next month. Whatever is trapped in those walls will be released. And I can't help but wonder, is that what it wanted all along? The servants found Lady Pembroke at the bottom of the grand staircase just before dawn. Her neck twisted at an impossible angle, eyes wide with terror. The local constabulary ruled it a tragic accident, a simple fall in the darkness, but the villagers of Little Thornwick knew better. No one simply falls at Thornwick Hall, not when the estate has claimed 23 souls since the reign of Queen Victoria. What the official reports never mentioned were the sooty handprints wrapped around her ankles, marks that had mysteriously vanished by the time the coroner arrived. Thornwick Hall looms over the misty moors of North Yorkshire, its Gothic spires piercing the fog like accusing fingers pointed at the heavens. Built in 1865 by coal and railway magnate Sir William Thornwick, the manor was intended to establish his family among Britain's aristocracy. Instead, it became their mausoleum. The troubles began during construction. 5 laborers died under mysterious circumstances, one crushed beneath a stone archway, another drowned in a well that had been bone dry the previous day, and 3 others perished in a fire that witnesses claimed burned with an eerie blue flame. Sir William dismissed these tragedies as the price of progress and pressed on, determined to complete his grand vision. The Thornwick family finally took residence during the harsh winter of 1868. Sir William, Lady Eleanor, and their 3 children, James, Catherine, and young Thomas. For a brief season, Thornwick Hall was the crown jewel of Yorkshire society. The nobility traveled from London itself for lavish hunting weekends and grand balls in the magnificent Great Hall with its vaulted ceilings and ancestral portraits. By spring, however, the whispers had begun. Lady Eleanor complained of peculiar sounds emanating from behind the wainscotings, scratching noises like some creature trying to claw its way through. The housemaids reported linens found soaked with dampness that smelled of the grave. The children's nanny resigned after insisting she'd seen a figure in Victorian morning dress watching the children as they slept. Sir William rejected it all as female hysteria and servant superstition. Old houses make strange noises, he insisted. Yorkshire is damp by nature, but then came the night that changed the legacy of Thornwick Hall forever. On the 21st of March, 1870, the family retired as usual after dinner. Shortly after midnight, blood-curdling screams echoed through the corridors. Servants rushed to the master bedroom to discover Lady Eleanor standing over Sir William's body, a fire iron gripped in her trembling hands. His skull had been beaten beyond recognition. The Persian carpets, imported at great expense, were saturated with his blood. When questioned by authorities, Lady Eleanor said only 5 words. The hall demanded his sacrifice. She was committed to Broadmoor Criminal Lunatic Asylum, where she died less than a year later, still muttering about the presence in the walls. The children were dispatched to distant relatives. Thornwick Hall stood empty, a dark silhouette against the moors. Over the decades, various families attempted to claim Thornwick Hall as their home. None remained longer than a single year. The pattern never varied. First came the sounds behind the walls. Then objects would shift position when no one was looking. Then the apparitions would begin. Finally, inevitably, death would visit. In 1904, the entire Blackwood family, parents, and 4 children were discovered in the chapel, arranged in a perfect circle. Their wrists had been slashed, yet no blade was ever found. Scotland Yard's finest detectives left baffled. In 1947, celebrated mystery novelist Agatha Westfield purchased the property, determined to pen its macabre history. Her manuscript remained unfinished. Groundskeepers found her hanging from the minstrel's gallery in the Great Hall. Her journal, recovered from her writing desk, contained one phrase repeated dozens of times: "It observes me from within the walls." The hall fell into disrepair for decades afterward, becoming ever more dilapidated with each passing season. Local university students would challenge one another to spend the night among its ruins. Most fled before the small hours, ashen-faced, and refusing to discuss what they had witnessed. Then, in 2019, the Yorkshire Heritage Trust decided to restore Thornwick Hall to its former glory as a historical landmark. Leading the restoration was Dr. Emma Clark, a pragmatic architectural historian who scoffed at the supernatural legends. "Every stately home in Britain has its ghost story," she told the BBC. "These tales emerge as a means for the common folk to process tragedy or explain the unexplainable. There's nothing otherworldly about Thornwick Hall." 6 weeks into the restoration, workers uncovered something alarming behind the East Wing's plasterwork. A hidden chamber sealed for over a century. Inside were human remains, not just one skeleton, but dozens. Carbon dating revealed they predated the hall's construction. The land, it appeared, had once been the site of an unmarked plague pit from the Black Death. Dr. Clark insisted the project continue after the remains were properly documented and removed for respectful reburial. But that same evening, the first inexplicable event occurred. A night watchman resigned immediately after reporting a figure composed of darkness itself, gliding down the main corridor. Other incidents followed swiftly. The unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps on the main staircase when no one was there. The overwhelming stench of putrefaction in rooms that had been thoroughly sanitized. cold spots so intense they caused window panes to frost over in the midst of summer. Dr. Clark remained resolute. Modern science would explain these phenomena, she maintained. Then came the night of August 12th. Dr. Clark was working late, alone in the hall's library. CCTV footage shows her working diligently until 23:17. Then she suddenly lifts her head as if hearing something unseen. Her expression transforms from confusion to unbridled terror. She rises from her chair, backing away from something beyond the camera's view. The footage captures her fleeing from the library through the great hall toward the main entrance. She never reaches it. At the foot of the grand staircase, something causes her to stumble. The camera briefly captures what appear to be dark, sooty handprints encircling her ankles. She falls, her head striking the marble newel post with sickening force. By the time emergency services arrived, the mysterious handprints had vanished completely. The restoration was abandoned immediately. Thornwick Hall stands empty once more, its windows like vacant eyes gazing out across the misty moors. Yet locals insist that on particularly foggy nights, when even the moon hides its face, lights can be seen moving from window to window. And occasionally, just occasionally, a face appears at the uppermost window, a woman's face, her mouth stretched wide in a silent, eternal scream. The most disturbing aspect of Dr. Clark's death wasn't captured by the security cameras. It was discovered days later when police examined her research materials. In her final notes, dated the morning of her death, she documented a shocking discovery in the hall's original architectural plans. Sir William Thornwick had deliberately designed the house with peculiar dimensions, walls of excessive thickness, spaces that didn't align correctly. The hall had been constructed to conceal something, or perhaps to imprison it. But here's the truly chilling part. Last week, a London property development firm purchased Thornwick Hall. Demolition is scheduled for next month. Whatever has been trapped within those walls for over a century will soon be unleashed. And I can't help but wonder, might that have been its intention all along? Standing empty for nearly 50 years, Old Manor Hospital isn't just abandoned. It's waiting. The massive structure looms over the California coastline, its windows like dead eyes, watching everyone who passes. Most locals avoid looking at it directly. They say, making eye contact with the building invites something in. But what exactly is still living inside those crumbling walls? Something that shouldn't exist anymore, something that never stops searching for new patients. The history of Old Manor Hospital reads like the pages of a nightmare. Built in 1923 as a state-of-the-art psychiatric facility, it quickly gained a reputation for experimental treatments that crossed ethical boundaries. Patients didn't just receive care here, they became test subjects. Dr. Malcolm Weiss, the hospital's founder and chief physician, believed mental illness could be surgically removed. His methods were radical, even by the standards of the time. Lobotomies were performed weekly. Electroshock therapy was administered at voltages high enough to cause permanent damage. And then there were the isolation chambers, rooms so small and dark that patients lost all sense of time and reality. By the 1940s, Old Manor housed over 600 patients, many committed against their will. Family members would drop off inconvenient relatives, never to return. The hospital records, discovered decades later, revealed disturbing patterns. Patients who entered with minor conditions like anxiety or insomnia were diagnosed with severe psychosis within weeks of admission. Perhaps most disturbing were the night logs kept by orderlies. Multiple staff members documented hearing singing from empty rooms. Patients reported seeing doctors enter their rooms at night, doctors who didn't exist according to hospital records. The most infamous story involves room 312. In 1952, a young woman named Eliza Chambers was admitted for what would now be diagnosed as postpartum depression. 3 days after her arrival, nurses found her room empty. A hospital-wide search turned up nothing. 2 weeks later, a maintenance worker discovered a crawl space behind room 312 that shouldn't have existed according to the building plans. Inside was Eliza, alive but unresponsive, her eyes open but seeing nothing. She never spoke again. Old Manor finally closed in 1974 after a government investigation uncovered evidence of patient mistreatment and suspicious deaths. The building was abandoned almost overnight. Equipment, furniture, and even patient files were left behind. The plan was to demolish it, but every company contracted for the job backed out after unexplained accidents. In 1987, a team of paranormal investigators gained permission to stay overnight. Their equipment malfunctioned within hours. The only recording that survived captured whispering voices repeating the same phrase, "Treatment isn't finished." Recent urban explorers who've braved the deteriorating structure report consistent experiences. The temperature drops dramatically in certain rooms. Footsteps follow them down hallways. And most disturbing of all, many describe feeling hands on their shoulders when they turn to leave, as if the building itself is trying to keep them inside. Last year, Mark Thompson, a local photographer, spent 3 hours documenting the hospital's remains. He compiled over 200 images of peeling wallpaper, rusted bed frames, and abandoned medical equipment. When reviewing his photos later, Thompson noticed something unsettling. In images of the main corridor, a figure in white appeared progressively closer in each shot, though Thompson insists he was alone. The basement level remains largely unexplored due to flooding and structural damage. Records indicate this area housed the most severe cases and the experimental treatment rooms. Urban explorers who've attempted to access this level report equipment turning on despite no power running to the building for decades. County records show that 1,872 patients died at Old Manor during its 51 years of operation. However, only 1,640 death certificates were ever issued. The fate of those missing 232 people remains unknown. Local historian Maria Santos has spent years collecting testimonies from former staff. One former nurse, speaking anonymously, claimed that certain patients weren't actually discharged, as records indicate. Some rooms had false backs, she revealed. When inspectors came, problem patients would disappear. After the inspectors left, so did the walls. 6 months ago, a group of college students broke into the hospital on a dare. 5 entered, 4 returned. The missing student's phone was found in the third-floor operating theater, the screen displaying a text message draft that read, "They're starting treatment. They say I've been sick all along." Police searched the building for 72 hours and found nothing. The case remains open. What keeps drawing people to Old Manor despite its dangers? Perhaps it's the need to understand what really happened inside those walls. Or maybe it's something else. The building itself calling to certain people, recognizing something in them that others can't see. One thing is certain, the locals who avoid eye contact with the building might be the wisest of all. Because if the stories are true, Old Manor Hospital doesn't just remember its past, it's still practicing medicine. The student who disappeared 6 months ago, his roommate received a text last week from his number. It contained just 4 words. Treatment is almost complete. The light at Morvin Point went dark for 17 minutes on December 12th. 17 minutes of pitch blackness during the worst storm the Scottish coast had seen in decades. By dawn, 3 fishing vessels had smashed against the rocks below, with 27 souls lost to the merciless North Sea. The Maritime Authority's investigation found nothing mechanically wrong with the lighthouse. The backup systems had been fully operational. The only explanation was human error. But head keeper Malcolm McTavish, a man with 30 years of unblemished service, maintained his innocence until his final breath. "I never left my post," he insisted. The light was burning bright, but something was standing in front of it, something that looked like a man, but wasn't. 2 days after giving his statement, Malcolm was found hanging in his quarters. His suicide note contained just 4 words: "He's coming for me." What the official report never mentioned was the salt water pooled beneath his dangling feet, despite the lighthouse being locked from the inside, or the barnacles discovered in his lungs during the autopsy. Morvin Point Lighthouse stands on a rocky outcrop off Scotland's northeastern coast, a solitary white tower rising defiantly against the gray horizon. Built in 1837 to warn ships away from the treacherous Morvin Teeth, a ridge of jagged rocks that has claimed in hundreds of vessels over the centuries. It has been continuously manned for almost 200 years. The lighthouse's history has always been tinged with tragedy. During its construction, 9 workers were swept away when an unexpected storm surge struck the outcrop. The first keeper, William Grant, lasted only 6 months before being found on the rocks below, his body broken, but his eyes, according to the recovery team, frozen open in an expression of purest terror. The pattern of mysterious deaths and unexplained accidents continued through the decades. In 1862, assistant keeper James Ferguson disappeared during a calm night with clear visibility. His logbook entry, written minutes before he vanished, noted, "Strange knocking from the lantern room. Going to investigate." His body washed ashore 3 weeks later, the flesh grotesquely bloated but somehow preserved, as if he'd been floating in ice-cold water despite the summer temperatures. In 1895, all 3 keepers vanished without trace during a December storm, leaving half-eaten meals on the table, and the lighthouse log updated to the hour of their disappearance. The final entry, written in increasingly erratic handwriting, read, "The wrecker is in the light. God save us." The incident caused such concern that the Northern Lighthouse Board considered automating Morvin Point decades before other lighthouses, but local shipping companies protested, insisting that human judgment was essential at such a dangerous location. The deaths were officially attributed to a rogue wave sweeping the men away, though no damage to the lighthouse structure was ever found. As technology advanced, Morvin Point was gradually modernized. By the early 2000s, it required only a single head keeper with occasional relief staff. Malcolm McTavish took the position in 1992, a former Royal Navy man seeking solitude after the death of his wife and daughter in a car accident. "The isolation suits me," he told the local newspaper upon his appointment. "Just me and the sea and the light, nothing to trouble me but the weather." For 28 years, Malcolm served without incident. His logs were meticulous, his maintenance schedule flawless. The light at Morvin Point never failed until that fateful night in December 2020. The storm had been brewing for days, a massive low-pressure system sweeping down from the Arctic. Meteorologists called it the worst in a generation. Shipping had been advised to seek shelter, but 3 local fishing vessels, desperate for catch before Christmas, had decided to risk the journey home. At 11:43 p.m., as the storm reached its peak, the light at Morvin Point went dark. 17 minutes later, it reactivated, seemingly on its own. By then, the 3 fishing boats had been driven onto the Morvin Teeth. There were no survivors. The Maritime Investigation Unit arrived the following morning. Led by Inspector Amy J. Adams, they found Malcolm McTavish at his post, shaking and incoherent. "I never left the light," He kept repeating, "I was here the whole time. I watched it burning. I watched it burning." The technical inspection found nothing wrong with the lighthouse systems. The main light was functioning perfectly. The backup generator had full fuel. The automated fail-safes were operational. According to all the data, the light should never have gone out. When Malcolm finally calmed enough for a formal interview, his statement disturbed the investigators deeply. "I was making my hourly check at 11:30, he told them, his weather-beaten hands trembling around his tea mug. The storm was fierce, but nothing the old tower hadn't weathered before. As I climbed the steps to the lantern room, I felt a sudden chill, colder than outside, if you can believe it, the kind of cold that freezes your bones. The light was burning bright as always. I checked the rotation mechanism, noted the readings in the log. Standard procedure. But as I turned to leave, I saw water on the floor. Not rainwater coming in from outside, this was seawater. I could smell the brine, and it wasn't leaking in. It was pooling outward like someone soaking wet had walked in. That's when I heard it, footsteps climbing the spiral stair, heavy, dragging steps like waterlogged boots. But I was alone in the lighthouse. The relief keeper wasn't due for another week. I called out, thinking maybe someone had been shipwrecked and somehow reached the lighthouse. No answer, just those slow, dragging steps coming closer. When the door to the lantern room swung open, there was no one there, just more seawater flooding in, bringing with it strands of seaweed and the stench of decay. Then the light flickered. Not mechanical, something was moving in front of it, a shadow taking form between me and the light. A man's shape, but wrong somehow, taller than any man should be and too thin, with arms that hung down past where knees should be. It was dripping wet, covered in barnacles and strands of kelp. Where its face should have been, there was just darkness under a rotting sou'wester hat. But I could feel it looking at me. It raised one impossibly long arm and pointed at me, then at the light, then out toward the sea. A voice came then, not spoken, but somehow inside my head, garbled, like trying to speak underwater, but I understood it clear enough. Your turn to bring them down. I tried to run, but I couldn't move. The thing stepped in front of the light, and though I could still see the lamp burning bright, I knew somehow that outside the light had gone dark. I was forced to watch as it stood there, blocking the beam. 17 minutes watching those poor souls being driven toward the rocks, hearing their screams over the storm, powerless to stop it. Then it turned to me again, leaned in close with that non-face. The stench was unbearable, like 1,000 rotten fish. It whispered, "Soon you'll join us. The wreckers always need new blood." Then it dissolved, just fell apart into seawater that flooded across the floor. The light shone bright again, but too late. Far too late. Inspector Amy J. report officially classified Malcolm's statement as the delusions of a man traumatized by his failure and the resulting deaths. She recommended psychiatric evaluation and immediate relief from duty. 2 days later, before the relief keeper arrived, Malcolm McTavish was found hanging from the railings of the lantern room. The official cause of death was listed as suicide. The case was closed. But Inspector Amy J. couldn't shake certain details from the scene. The salt water pooled beneath Malcolm's body, despite the lighthouse being sealed against the storm. The strange barnacle-like growths found in his lungs during autopsy. The logbook entry, written in Malcolm's hand but somehow different, discovered after his death, "The wrecker has chosen me. I am to be the darkness now." Most troubling of all was the state of the lighthouse lamp, physically undamaged but tainted with a film of algae-like substance that 3 separate cleaning attempts failed to remove. The Northern Lighthouse Board made the unprecedented decision to replace the entire lantern assembly. During the renovation, workers discovered something behind the Victorian-era wall panels, a hidden logbook, far older than the official records. Entries dating back to the original construction of the lighthouse told a story absent from official histories. The first entry, dated June 1836, was written by the lighthouse's designer, Thomas Stevenson. Local fishermen warn of a figure they called the Wrecker, a malevolent spirit they claimed lured ships onto the rocks before the lighthouse was built. They say he appeared as a lantern light on stormy nights, guiding unsuspecting vessels to their doom. They fear our lighthouse will anger him by preventing his grim harvest. Superstitious nonsense, of course. The light will bring only safety to these waters. A later entry, written in a different hand just before the lighthouse was completed, found a strange figurehead today washed upon our construction site. Carved wood, remarkably preserved despite obvious age, depicts a gaunt man in oilskins with an unsettling blank face. Men refuse to touch it, claiming it brings ill fortune. Engineer Stevenson ordered it incorporated into the lighthouse foundation stone as a gesture to appease local superstitions. Masons completed the work at dusk. All reported hearing strange wailing from the stone as the tide rose. The final entry, dated the night before the first keeper's death. William, unable to sleep third night running, claims to hear whispering from the stones at high tide. Says a figure watches him from the lantern room when he is below, but vanishes when he ascends the stairs. I tell him it's merely exhaustion and isolation affecting his mind. Yet I cannot explain the seawater we find each morning, nor the barnacles growing on the inside of the windows. The renovation team found one more troubling artifact, a small chamber beneath the lighthouse, accessible only at the lowest tides. Inside was a collection of personal items, a pocket watch stopped at 11:43, a child's doll crusted with salt, a wedding ring engraved with the initials M.M., Malcolm McTavish's ring, which his body had been found without. The chamber's wall bore a crude carving, a lighthouse with a dark shape standing before its beam. Below it, names and dates, dozens of them, the most recent being Malcolm McTavish. One space remained empty, as if waiting for the next name. The Northern Lighthouse Board quickly ordered the chamber sealed with concrete. The findings were never made public. Morvin Point Lighthouse was fully automated the following year against the protests of local fishermen who insisted a human presence was necessary. For several months, the automated systems functioned perfectly. Ships passed safely, guided by the unwavering beam. Then came another December storm. At exactly 11:43 p.m., the light at Morvin Point went dark for precisely 17 minutes. Despite multiple redundant systems, despite remote monitoring, despite every modern safeguard, the Coast Guard received a single automated distress call that night, not from a ship, but from the lighthouse itself. The message, generated by systems that should not have been capable of such communication: the wrecker is in the light. Your turn to bring them down. When engineers reached the lighthouse the next day, they found the lantern room flooded with seawater. The new state-of-the-art LED lamp was encrusted with barnacles that tests later revealed were of a species extinct for over a century. The security camera, designed to monitor the automated equipment, had captured one image before failing. The photograph shows the empty lantern room with a dark figure standing before the light, impossibly tall, impossibly thin, wearing what appears to be decayed oilskins and an old sou'wester hat. Where its face should be is only darkness. One elongated arm points out to sea. In the background, barely visible through the storm-lashed windows, are the lights of a cruise ship that changed course that night, inexplicably drawn toward the Morvin Teeth. Morvin Point Lighthouse remains automated to this day. The Northern Lighthouse Board instituted a new protocol. During December storms, ships are warned to maintain at least 5 nautical miles distance from the point, regardless of whether the light is visible. Most follow this advice, some do not. Local fishermen refuse to sail after dark in December. They claim that on stormy nights, if you look carefully, you can see not one but two lights at Morvin Point, the official beam, and a second, older light that seems to beckon ships closer to the rocks. Most disturbing of all are the reports from the maintenance crews who service the lighthouse quarterly. They work only in daylight, always in pairs, yet each team reports the same experiences: footprints appearing in dust they've just cleaned away, seawater pooling on floors far above the splash line, the overwhelming smell of decay that comes and goes without source, and voices whispering from the stones at high tide. Last month, a new technician broke protocol by staying overnight to complete urgent repairs. He was found the next morning staring out to sea, unresponsive. When finally coaxed to speak, he said only, "The wrecker showed me. It's my turn next December." He resigned immediately. 1 week later, he purchased a small boat. Local harbor records show he takes it out every night, regardless of weather. Always after dark, always alone, always with a lantern burning bright at the bow.